And I sent it to my grandma. She was like, oh yeah, that's a hit. That's a hit, that one. So whenever I play it live, I'm like, all right guys, you heard it from grandma, like you're listening to a hit. Hi, I'm Jade Bird. This is my track by track for Different Kinds of Light for Enemy. So DKOL, the intro, weirdly it was before I'd really managed to get anything recorded down, and it was in the middle of the pandemic, so I was staying at my mum's house because we literally haven't had a house because we've been touring constantly. And my mum had this shed they just built at the bottom of the garden, and me and my partner went down there, and he just bought this new modular synth, and we were really experimenting with it and using the vocal off the track that I'll talk about in a minute and running it through these synthesizers. And trying to get this really cool sound, this beautiful intro, and it just, everything else built around it, so it made sense that that was at the start. Open Up the Heavens. So that was ironically the last song I wrote for the record, and I was in Nashville in this studio called RCA. It's like this really huge studio, and like Elvis and Dolly, and you know, everyone's kind of been in that room, so there's a lot of ghosts there, like positive ghosts. And I remember getting to the end of the recording process, like the end of the 10 days, 2 weeks, and feeling like, oh, you know, I've got to make the most of being here. And I sat in the vocal booth one evening and just started with that riff. And the producer came and popped his head in and was like, oh, you've really got to write something with that. It's a really cool thing, like riff. And I spent the night, finished the riff, sent him the song. And then we got all the musicians back in by the end of the next day to come back in to track that. So it was the very, very final song on the record. So Honeymoon's weird because it's sort of vignettes of relationships. So it's primarily based on my mum's and my grandma's relationships and watching them, you know, really just trying to please the person they're with, even though I don't feel the person they're with is worthy of their time or effort. So Honeymoon is about that exhaustive process of being like, you know, trying to be good enough for this person, trying to make every day feel like a honeymoon. But then I sort of, in the middle eight, did this vignette of my current relationship. And I feel like because I grew up with my mum and grandma, we all lived in one house, even though it's kind of, you know, hodgepodge, I think that's the way it was in my brain, just all these vignettes of relationships and impressions of my younger self. So Punchline, when I was going to record the record, I had to quarantine in Mexico City for like 2 weeks to be able to get into the USA. And there was a little one-floor apartment we stayed in and couldn't really leave. And I just wrote and wrote and wrote every single day, and Punchline was one of them songs that came out. In my head, I used to live in a very small town in Wales, and I had this very sort of Springsteen-esque idea of a couple, and sort of a waitress and a guy who's having like a total midlife crisis, but she's trying to hold the relationship up a little bit, and he's just a bit of a, you know, a waste man. And I think that's where I was going with that song when I wrote it. That was the image I had in my head. Different Kinds of Light really was this first song that came out of the ether for me. I was on a Father John Misty, Jason Isbell tour, and I was very, very tired from touring. It had been literally 3-4 years I'd been touring in my life up to that point. And creatively, there was no light. There was a real dark corridor in front of me I couldn't get past, really. And I remember just sitting down and I was listening to this Stevie Nicks song called Storms off Tusk, you know, the Fleetwood Mac album. I was obsessed, and it was really making me feel a lot better. And I was inspired by that, and it was the first song that really came out of it, and I constantly, you know, rewrote it until I got to the point where it just became the whole theme, this light at the end of the tunnel. I tried to write a lot. It's, my writing style's changed, so I used to be very much like song a day, you know, you have to write 1,000 songs to get, you know, a good one. Now I tend to like live, and then just write 20 songs, 20, 30 songs, and try and live for a few months and write a whole batch. So my style has personally changed from doing a bit every day and diluting it to saving it up and then doing it. Sometimes it's quicker to walk away when you see signs of a darker day. The more that you leave, so Trick Mirror is very insightful about me. Due to my past, I feel like I find it quite hard to be open or not have an armor. I think if you've had any sort of trauma in relationships or in family relationships, when you finally meet someone that's worth it, you're really trying to sabotage it for the first year because you're not used to it. You know, you're just like, you're gonna go, so you'll walk away anyway. And I think that's why I got the metaphor of love looking like an avalanche, because it's like you have to kind of turn around and accept it and be like, okay, you know, I'm going to take the good and the bad to ever be able to really, you know, fall in love. And that's why the lyric is like, you know, no one can love you if you don't stay. It's very much about that. So, yeah. Ooh, I'm getting lost tonight, and I don't really mind if it takes you ages. Ooh, you can waste now. I'm getting lost. So that's about the frustration as a young woman touring. I went to a lot of cities, but I didn't feel safe enough at night to go out on my own. And there's nothing more than I really love than a city at night, in the middle of the night, 3 a.m. when you've been on, you know, on the piss or whatever. And it's just this really ethereal, apocalyptic feeling. And I was just getting so frustrated because I didn't feel safe enough to go. So I staged it in this way that you fall out with a partner. And it's, you know, it's worth the risk to go and put yourself out there to go and get away. I'm getting lost, like I don't care. About feeling safe. So in a way, it's a protest song on how I was feeling, touring and being cooped up all the time. Yeah. Houdini. Houdini is about the males in my family disappearing, like doing a disappearing act. When I first went to upstate New York to really try and get creatively back on track, because that for some reason is my like spiritual place, like it's where I can write and feel comfortable. And I kind of wrote it, and it was the first and last record sort of on my past. It really focused on my past and these male figures who'd done a disappearing act. And the first verse is based on this argument my parents had when I was a kid and being a bit of a part of that, and I put myself in the first person in Germany. And then the rest of it, like I said, is just this kind of like, if anyone needs lessons on leaving, I'll send them to you, Houdini. It's every man in my life who's, you know, done a disappearing act, yeah. It takes a lot to make my mum cry. I'm trying to think, there's another one that made my mum cry, but, you know, it's therapeutic, and to be honest, I didn't see my mum straight away before the record. I kind of got to play it her as a whole thing, and so she was taking it in as a full album emotionally, as opposed to being like, you know, here's a song, and she knows, you know, there's been shit, man, so it's no surprise to her. Yeah. And if you get caught doing nothing at all, say that I wasn't short of 6 feet tall. 1994 is super fun. It's very abstract. Sometimes I write these really weird songs that just don't seem to fit anywhere. And 1994 is basically a Bonnie and Clyde song. It's like about a bank robbery. And so all the lyrics about a gun to my spine, it's basically me in a car and I'm literally being forced to go into a bank. It was like, you know, the Bonnie and Clyde thing. But it's this really strange, abstract 2-minute thing with like these crazy Mick Ronson guitars, and I just absolutely love it. It's like nothing I've ever done before. So now's the time I wrote in the same Mexican apartment, and for me it was about a loved one not believing in themselves and feeling like I wanted to write them a motivational song, you know, not in a corny way, but just like, come on, you know, like that's the middle eight. It's like, you know, baby, I know you're blue, but I'll be with you with every moon, but we can't keep seeing the world in this pessimistic light. Now's the time to get out there. And you know, it just turned, again, with the times, it just turned into this like memo, I think, or motto or something for me. So it's a very happy song. It's the only song that's ever made me really smile in the studio when I was listening to it at the desk. So yeah, I love that song. It's so fun playing live, like, because we've got bongos for starters, which is mental. Like, it's a bit Stone Roses in effect, like when we play it, the arrangement. And I've started to do like a two-step with my bass player, like in the thing, you know what I mean? So I can actually do a move, which is lovely. But yeah, it's just so much fun playing it live, definitely.
If you want somebody to judge, if you want somebody to blame, if you want somebody to hate, I'm a great candidate. If you want...
Candidate is sort of a song about feeling like you're being taken the piss out of all the time. It's a bit like, as a woman again, it's very much like, you know, if you want somebody to love, if you want somebody to hate, like, I'm here, mate. Like, you know, walk on me, it's absolutely fine. Like, it's a real middle finger song. And, you know, talking to a lot of my friends and going through their experience, it breaks my heart. And when I play it live, I feel like this camaraderie that I'm like really like sticking it to, you know what I mean, to the man. And it feels like so good to play. But the song is just basically about that. It's kind of very simple, but extremely necessary for me to sing.
And you see it over and over. Calm your breathing as you pull.
Red, white, and blue. So that was when I was writing upstate. My partner buys and sells guitars in America and the UK to try and make a little bit of cash on the side. And he was on one of his trips. He flew down to Virginia, which is, you know, literal. It's very, you know, it's wild country, Virginia. And he told me this story of this guy he met called Herb, and it was very clear he was a, you know, he was a Vietnam War veteran, and he was, you know, suffering from some signs of PTSD. And, you know, he phoned me and he told me this long story, and it's probably too meandering for me to go into it. And there were some funny parts and there was some absolutely tragic parts. And my family's got a lot of army in them, my mum and dad, my grandma, granddad. I was very moved. And so I sat down that night and I called it like Ballad for Herb or something and sent it to him, and he was like, wow, this is, you know. But it's a very special song, I think, for me personally. It's sad, but yeah, special. Rely on. That's a love song. It's about being there for someone. Like, it's very, very literal. My favorite lyric is, you know, if you need someone to rely on when the lions move. I really love the imagery of, you know, when somebody really is just waiting to get you, and I'm gonna be there to protect you. Like, I really loved writing that. And like I said, I wrote it with my partner, with my guitarist, and all the middle eight, like, don't be scared, I'll be there. Like, we echoed that together, and it's very emotional and close to home for me because it's all very real what I'm writing about. So it's a very nice love song, yeah.
All things got better the moment I fell. When I wasn't looking, it all stood still.
Prototype. So I always tell this story on stage about my grandma, because if you write, you know, books or stories or songs, your grandma's like, oh yeah, it's great, 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 but when are you going to write a happy one? You know, seriously, like all this sad stuff, you know, very, like, love it, but it's a happy one. And I remember writing Prototype, which is a straight up love song. You can't get away from it. And it's weird because I put Quarantine in it before this all really kicked off. I wrote it in Europe before everything closed down. So it was weird, all that similarity. But yeah, so then when I sent it to my grandma, she was like, oh yeah, that's a hit. That's a hit, that one. So whenever I play it live, I'm like, all right guys, you heard it from grandma, like, yeah, you're listening to a hit. But yeah, it's a sweet song.
Why is it so hard? Why is it so hard? Why is it so hard? I've given you a head start.
So Head Start, the reason I chose to put it at the end as a sort of bonus track, I feel like the meaning is the most flippant. So a lot of the album tracks are like, you know, very incredibly meaningful at the frontier of them. But Head Start was just, it was me sitting at the writer's chair and going like, all right, what's gonna happen? And I just played the two chords and it came out. And it's very simple meaning. It's, you know, about giving someone a head start on knowing that you're into them and them just never being able to see. It's a very simple concept, but for me it was like sitting back and being able to write that. I was like, okay, I'm back, I know what I'm doing, I can sort of write next album kind of time. So that was important for me for that reason opposed to the meaning.